I'm live on Facebook. Let me know when you got me, Maddie. And according to Instagram, we are live now. What's going on? It is the one and only Justin.
Now, what's
how
going
we doing?
on?
Good, man. How are you guys? Today is Throw It Out There Thursday. So feel free to throw some questions out there. We'll answer them. If you guys have something that maybe partake in this conversation.
It's Tech Tuesday, not Throw It Out There Thursday, Justin. What? Just so you know.
I'm already
I was like, wait a minute.
We're looking at each other going,
I was like, wait.
man, my week has gone flying by.
Tech Tuesday, Justin. Tech Tuesday.
Sweet, I got 2 more days to get more stuff done. All right, take it back. Tech Tuesday. Tech Tuesday, all day today, is going to be on valving on the inside of shocks. Obviously, we don't do valving on the outside of shocks, but what we're going to talk about is different ways that you can do it, but particularly the uncomfortable conversation about how other people do internal valving compared to how we do. Now, we are not going to be naming any names. That is not our job, and we definitely don't want to be that guy. But we're going to show you some of the stuff that we find inside of cars that come in that we redo a lot. And the differences between what you get for the word valving. We have a lot of customers always ask us or tell us, hey, we say, hey, did you get valving done in your car yet? And they're like, oh yeah, I got that. I got that done from so-and-so. Well, that doesn't mean that you got the same thing that we do. It doesn't mean that you got the same thing that the guy down the street does. Valving is specific and different according to the place that you take your car to have it done. Usually, the prices are all the same. Usually $650 to $750 to get inside the shocks and do all the valving. But what you get for that money is much, much different depending on where you go. So yes, it does matter who you choose to do your internal work. You guys have anything before I get into some of the little details?
Rich Fortin just wanted you to know he was checking his calendar for a second there because he adjusted.
Yeah, sorry about that, man.
Got a couple people like, holy shit, it's Thursday.
It's been a busy week for me. So let's start with some of the simpler things that we see quite often. We're going to use bypass shocks as a example. So bypass tubes on the inside. These are all different bypass tubes from different shocks. It doesn't have to be an X3. It could be on a Turbo S. It could be on an earlier Turbo XP. It doesn't really matter. The point is what's actually being done. So follow all the way on my right. This will be the simplest work that someone's ever going to do. This tube right here is a factory Turbo S with all of these ports. These are side stack or bypass ports. These 2 threaded holes hold valving that covers these ports up, and that valving is actually right behind you. Chase can show these stacks. These are called side stacks, and these side stacks are usually stacked in triplicate, and these side stacks sit on the side of the bypass ports and cover up those ports. As the piston travels upward through that shock on a compression stroke, then oil is forced out of the hole, the bypass port hole, and it bends the valving out of the way, allowing that oil to bypass the piston and end up going back through the bottom. These side stacks are a way that you can tune the system. Also, size of the holes and locations of the holes are another way you can tune the system. And then down here below on the piston, you've got actual piston valving or valve shims. Everybody's got a different word for these, but this is a valve stack spread out so you can see, but normally this would actually be stacked on the piston like so. These are not exactly the right sizes. I'm just kind of using them as a basic guide for you guys to see. Now, this right here is a bone stock tube. It is unmodified, and it would normally have side stacks on it. And what we see a lot is someone went out and got their internal shock work done, and the only thing that was done is the guy changed this valve stack on the piston and sent them down the road. That is the simplest thing you could possibly ever do to a bypass shock. And honestly, it is unfair to the people who paid full price for shock work to just get piston valving change when they're paying $750 for the work. We see that a lot. Typically that is smaller shops or things like that. I'll spread out all over the United States that do just that. So when you say, hey, I got the valving done, and you went to a smaller shop and they just changed the valving on the piston, you're getting shorted. You're getting a very, very simple thing. It didn't change very much. It might be a little stiffer, it might be a little softer, but it certainly doesn't have progression. It's not plush in the chop and better in the bump stage. It doesn't stop the car from bucking or kicking. All those things you're not getting. So that's simple. Let's go to the next step. This one right here is something we see a lot, and this is where the bypass tubes themselves have actually been welded up. So what's happening here is a shop has welded up a bleed hole. This is one bleed hole in the side. A bleed hole is a hole that has no valving covering it up, so it's not regulated, it's not controlled, and oil passes both directions through this hole. So what bleed holes do is give you really good ride quality in the little chop and chatter, small things that you run over, little rocks. It makes that feel good, but the more bleed holes you have, the more uncontrolled movement you have, which is boatiness, constantly moving and never stopping the car from doing that. A lot of extra body roll comes from doing that. So you can go too far really, really quick, and you don't want to do that because it creates a lot of problems. But what we see here with welded up holes, this is one way to stop some body roll, is weld up a bleed hole. This is also a way you can weld up one of the bypass ports, and this will actually stiffen the system. It'll also give you more bump stage, so when you're compressing, jumping the car and you land, the piston's on the way up, as soon as it passes that last hole, it gets stiffer real quick. Lowering the system will also give you bump stage. Here's the problem when you start doing this, when you start welding up tubes. It warps the tube. On the inside of the shock, those tubes have holes right down the center, and that piston and wear band run right across them. And what we see is guys weld that stuff up and they don't sand it down to give clearance, or at least keep the seal on that piston, and it takes the wear band right out, and the inside of that shock is junk because you've got parts floating around inside the oil. Also, when you weld this stuff up, you warp the tube. When you warp the tube, you don't get seal on that wear band, and all of a sudden it rides so soft it blows right through the compression, it bottoms out, and you hurt yourself. On the aluminum tubes, which are typical on live valve systems or electronic shocks, if you weld the aluminum tube, that will crack, it will blow up, and you will have massive failure, and you're going to be buying brand new shocks. This particular one we caught right away. So as soon as the guy drove his car, he brought it to us, we changed everything out and got it before he had an explosion. So want to be really careful about anyone or using anyone that is welding up the tube on a regular basis. Now, we weld tubes just to go testing and find out where we want it to go, because we're going to drive the car for 20 miles to see if we like it or not, and we know that the wear band's going to be junk, we know we're going to have issues, and we're going to end up putting brand new tubes in it. But we do not run that type of a system on a regular basis for our customer setups. The other things, so going on to another shop.
Well, Justin, also not to interrupt,
yes.
on the aluminum tube, also by heating it up, there's a coating on it. Once you heat it up, that coating's gone.
That is true.
So that destroys that coating. I don't mean to cut you off, but it destroys the coating. And that also.
Right. You are right. So these aluminum tubes, to keep them from wearing out prematurely on the inside, where the piston is actually traveling up and down all the time, that's got a coating on it. It's similar to an anodized coating, but it's not quite anodizing. And as soon as you weld these up, it blows that coating off the inside, and all of a sudden you've got instant wear on the inside of that aluminum tube. Not only that, but combine that with a warped tube and you're screwed. So you do not weld any of the live valve systems. And you know what? It just occurred to me, Steve, is we might be helping a lot of shock shops out right now. Telling them what not to do.
Yeah.
Because they're in the middle of doing it and they're having their customers figure out where the problems are, and that sucks.
Yep.
That should never happen. You do that on your own car when you're testing. You do not do that on customers' cars.
I agree.
I think you had something you were going to say.
Yeah, so I do have a question from one of the guys. Soto _ No Mercy 772 said, "What up, guys? I already have the dual rate spring kit from you. Can I add the IQS system right away, or do I have to modify or add something else before I do IQS?"
You can answer that, Steve.
You can do it right away.
Absolutely.
You can do it right away. You don't have to do any other modifications. You can do it, right away.
Here's the only thing, though. You will have to pay the labor twice.
Correct.
To get inside the shock. So if you did IQS now, you would have to pay the labor to get inside the shocks when you do the valving later.
And I believe it's about $500 cheaper.
If you do them together.
If you do them together. So if you do the valving with the IQS, it is about $500 cheaper to do.
It's going to save you some money to do them together. So try to do that if you possibly can. If not, then go ahead and do it anytime you want to. You don't have to wait.
Yeah, correct.
Matt, you got anything?
Nope.
Awesome. Cool. Then, next. So another thing that we see a lot is this kind of third section over here. Now, the tubes aren't welded, which is good. So that's one thing that this particular shock shop is not going to have an issue with, like this one. But what we see a lot is that these tubes are drilled out. So I'm going to take a stock tube and place that right next to this one that's been modified. So what happened here, if Chase can get in there close enough, you guys can tell what's up, is the stock ports on here are fairly small, I mean under 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and these have been drilled out quite a bit. Now when you drill these ports out, a couple things happen. One, the vehicle gets pretty plush. All of a sudden the mid-stroke that's past chop and chatter but into a 1-foot whoop, say, or up short of a 1-foot whoop, that mid-stroke gets really plush. And it feels good when you drive the car. The problem with it is that you can actually blow right through that mid way too fast, and it smacks the bump stage above those ports so hard that it feels harsh. As soon as you go through 1-footers, it feels great, but when they get to 1.5 feet tall, it's brutal, like it's super bitey and hurts your back. That is very common when you over drill side ports and allow too much flow that way. So what we see with guys that drill these out is they try to overcome the fact that it blows right through the middle, and they go with a gigantic valve stack. So look at this. That is a monstrous stack of valving. You know, this type of thing is what has to go in this package to overcome the fact that this piston is flying through the bypass ports too quickly and has to slow down at the very end to keep you from bottoming out the car. So it's plush, but then it hurts, and that transition is nasty. It's not smooth. That's super common when you drill out ports like that. Also, when you drill out ports, then you better be really good at cleaning the inside out. And if you look
at
inside
all those
there,
burrs.
There's a ton of burrs on the inside of these ports that my finger can run over and get cut on. Those burrs take out wear bands, and they take out a piston seal, and you end up with shocks with parts in them floating around, and that they do not work.
And they get stuck in the adjusters, which then leaves the adjusters free flowing the whole time, and then your adjuster doesn't work. So it's just kind of a
It's a total domino effect that takes out the shock, and all of a sudden, thing might have rode decent the first day, but it goes downhill really quick. That is a common theme when you start modifying tubes like that. Also, another thing that we see, this is a factory piston, if you can see that properly. These ports are all where oil is flowing above and below valving. So if I throw valving on here, you can see that oil is going to shoot through one of these ports and move the valving out of the way. Well, that's a stock piston. Here is a piston that we find inside this type of a tube setup, where we've got holes that are drilled through the piston, and these are free bleed holes. Now this is common to have a free bleed hole in a piston, but typically they're very small. Free bleed holes are commonly like this one right here, where it's about 40 thousandths of an inch, and they're used in piston design to allow you to assemble the shock. So when you're pushing the piston through the oil, it's easy to bleed the air through that bypass port, but you never want to drill this many holes in a piston and this big. This is massive. So what you've done by doing this is you've made it ride amazing in the chop and chatter, because you've got oil free flowing by this piston that's uncontrolled, but you've ruined the bump stage. It blows through the bump stage and bottoms out real easy. Also, it becomes boaty, just like adding free bleed ports to the sides of these bypass holes or bypass tubes. And when you do this type of work, you go back and you have to run gigantic stacks to keep the thing stiff enough in the bump stage so that it doesn't hurt people.
Looks like a pyramid in Egypt, Justin.
It is a pyramid in Egypt. That thing is massive. So I mean, here compared, there's a standard stack that works just fine without bottoming out, as long as the bypass ports are correct and as long as you don't have free bleed holes that are too big in the piston. So that is a huge difference in the amount of valving that's required. When you overvalve systems, you can also create too much pressure in the shock when it finally gets to the bump stage, and you end up blowing up shocks. On bypasses, you can split the bypass tube, or on a non-bypass shock like a live valve RC2, you can balloon the body of the shock or blow the cap off of it or blow the reservoir off of it. That's super common. We see that out in the dunes a lot when people have modified shocks for their customers. Customer goes out, lands it from a jump, and all the shocks are ballooned or blown up. They come to us. It's a brand new set of shocks. I mean, you really destroy a lot of parts, and there's not much you can keep. I think you had something you wanted to say.
So I got a couple really good questions. But one, M Bain 91 said, just tested out the new sway bar and links and limit straps. Product is amazing. Everything I expected. Awesome, man. That's great to hear.
Awesome. Thank you for the feedback.
Also have a couple questions here. Robbie Fraser said, can you drill holes and add valves on a Walker velocity shock to make it an internal bypass? Or how does the velocity shock differ from what you're showing?
So the answer is you cannot make a velocity a bypass style system. Bypass shocks are a tube within a tube, and it has to be designed from scratch to do that. You can't add it to a velocity or modify a velocity to do that. The difference mainly is that a velocity is a single tube shock, meaning the body you see on the outside of that shock is the same body that the piston is riding on the inside. So the only control and tunability that you have in a velocity would be the valving that's on the piston, different piston designs, some flow rates going through the shaft, and also a velocity has a needle that the piston is going to go inside the shaft. It closes a bypass port and actually stiffens the system up. So their bump stage in a velocity is mostly needle based as opposed to bypass tube based. Completely different designs. They act all very different, and preferably I like the bypass design over the other. But I also love an RC2 design because it has a bottom out cup that's tunable as opposed to a needle that's not as tunable. And you can make an RC2 ride amazing, just like a bypass too. What you got?
Oh, nothing.
Nothing?
I actually got one more question, Justin. Sorry. Landon Dame said, do you guys use CFD, computal fluid dynamic models, or shock dynos to design your valves and bypass tubes? Or do you just do trial and error?
I would say a little bit of both. We don't use CFD, usually shock dyno work. We have a great relationship with Fox. We can take any of the systems that we want to run and we can test those on Fox's dyno. We do not have a dyno in-house, we use Fox's. And we can just use that as a final check to make sure that we're not over-pressurizing a system and going to hurt parts. We have that working relationship with Fox helps us and our customers, because we can make sure that what we're doing for you isn't going to cause a problem. And that's the stuff we see on a routine basis, blown up shocks or components that have failed because they're overpressurized by other shock guys. So we use the dyno to verify what we've done. How do we get to that point? Mostly experience. Secondly, trial and error, meaning we'll drive a car, it's too stiff, we'll soften it up in certain areas and stiffen it up in others so that it's a gradual transition from the nice plush feel to a bottom out stage that actually works without hurting people's backs and also without blowing up parts. Once we've gotten a feel for what we want out of it and a function in the car for drivability, then we'll verify our system on Fox's dyno to make sure that's never going to hurt parts. Hopefully that
I think that answered the question for him.
The right way. So back to a drilled out system. Another thing that we find a lot in these drilled out systems is you look at this hole right here. Well, that hole is drilled out so big that it's actually past this slotted cut. And what happens when you actually put a side stack on that, you can see that that hole is actually going to flow oil right through that side slot. The side slot is a material relief that Fox puts into the system so that if there is any material going through the oil, it doesn't get stuck underneath that side stack valving. It can actually clear itself out, and by having that port too large and going in here, it's a free bleed hole. You might as well have drilled this hole straight in the side of this tube. Now all of a sudden the car bottoms out instantly. It has Bodie feel that you can't control. Rebound in it is uncontrollable, so you go right through the whoops. It starts to buck a little more, buck way too much, and flip the car. It just kind of never ends. It's a domino effect when you do that. Another thing that we see on drilled out tubes is these are factory side stack screws. If I drop one, it'll be gone forever. But these hold the side stacks in place. Now, I'm showing you this because it's fairly important. When you start changing side stacks, the length of that screw is really important, because if it's too long, it goes inside this tube and it smacks the wear band on the piston and the shock's destroyed. If this is too short, then there's not enough thread on here to hold the valving in place. You go hit a big bump, it blows the valving right off, shears the threads right off, and then now you have parts inside the shock and the shock is destroyed. So the length of this screw is important. Well, Fox does not make different lengths in these because they purposely have a certain thickness of these side stacks. So when some guys that we see try and remove some of these side stacks and go from 3 to 1, and then go and put this back on, now that factory screw is too long because there's less valving on there to stop that. So what they'll do is they'll cut valving in half and use it as spacers, like these guys, valving that snapped in half, use them as spacers so they get the length back and use the screw that they want. It's kind of a cheesy way of doing it. So what we did to allow us to tune side stacks, we have our own made. So these are hardened material side stack screws that are in different lengths that we have made. We're the only one that does that. And this way we have the option of changing any side stacks to anything we want without snapping them in half and doing half stacks to create the length that you actually have to have. So since I'm I guess I'm done with what we see a lot of other than these rear tubes. These rear tubes are out of cars that we've fixed. This one's got larger diameter bleed holes in the side, which makes it Bodie. This one's got much larger holes drilled in it, again, too large to the point where it crawls off into the clearance slot. This one here, someone machined their own flat spot in it, like the factory two. They machined their own in it to put their own ports higher up or lower, depending on how you're looking at this. But what they didn't do is they didn't put in there the material clearance slots. So that means if any material, like a flaked off or fluffed off piece of plastic bushing inside the shock gets up in here, that valve stack on the side is open with material underneath it. If it's open, that's a free bleed hole. All of a sudden it bottoms out instantly and it becomes Bodie, and you wonder why. You also don't have rebound control with side stacks that are sitting off of the tube. So it's kind of a big deal not going the extra distance to do exactly what's already been engineered into the system. Any questions on any of those before I get into what we do?
No, just random questions, and a bunch of people are asking about the Speed UTV, which we're not even going to entertain that question at all. Everybody just asking
every single time. I will actually say it, all right? So this will answer every speed question. The car should be amazing. We can't wait to drive it. Until we drive it, I can't give you an opinion.
Boom.
Done.
But I do have, so there is a couple questions that I can answer on here. Are you guys going to have sway bars for the 64-inch X3? We do have rear sway bars with links. We do not have the front, but you can do front links. And then Jay Hupp said, how long?
Actually, the question was, are we going to?
Are you ever going to have sway bars?
Are we ever going to have one for the front?
It doesn't say the front. It just said, are you ever going to have sway bar?
Okay, so we have rears.
Just so we have the rear.
I'm going to go ahead and say that we're not going to do bars for the front.
I agree.
All right. So the answer to that is no, and I know Matt, 64-inch Matt behind you, he's upset because he wanted one for the front.
Well, he
and
tips
I know
over
a lot of you
too.
guys might be because we were going to make one for the front. The market's not there. I'm sorry. There's a few guys that want them, but it's just not much. And we have to do batches of hundreds to make bars inexpensive enough to sell them. So, we've had 5 people ask. I don't think it's worth it for us to do it, and I think we're probably not going to.
I'm 2 of them.
You are 2 of them, Matt. You are 2 of those 5.
So,
quick question to Justin from our boy Jay Hupp. He said, how long does the typical nitrogen charge last on a dynamic shock? So how long after we charge it, will it lose nitrogen? Will it not? How does that work?
well, typically, if you don't have any seal issues, then it should never have a problem. But the reality is that you have small seal issues at all times on shocks, even with the seals are perfect. So I would say 1 full season, no matter what, they're good. 2 seasons, you might be pushing it. If I was you, I would be checking the nitrogen pressure, or at least topping it off with the right nitrogen pressure once a year. That's what I would do.
There is one gentleman, Justin, named Sean Sarin 103. He has asked about 5 times to go live with us. Are we allowing people to go live with us, or have we tried?
Well, that's a Chase thing, and I think we have an issue with that.
Okay, no, he's just asked 4 or 5 times, so I didn't know.
We're gonna go live this Thursday. Any questions that you want to go live with this Thursday?
Thursday only. Okay.
Thursday we are. We have some issues with doing that right now.
Perfect.
All right.
There you go, Sean.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right. So now that we've covered, someone's just changed valving for you, someone that's welded up tubes and destroyed tubes for you, and someone who's drilled the ports out too large, created other issues, or requiring way too much valving, requiring half stacks of valving to use the original screws, drilling ports in pistons that create other problems, causing valving problems. After we've gone through all that, that's pretty typical. Let's look at what we do. So first, I'm not going to tell you exactly what we do, but I'm going to give you an idea. We spent a lot of time developing this, and I'm not going to give you the secret sauce. But we, number 1, make our own tubes. Now, the manufacturing of tubes is important. I am not showing you the tubes that we actually run in our customers' setups. Partially because I don't want you to really see where we run our ports and sizes of ports when it comes to other shock companies who might be watching this video. By the way, other shock companies, you're welcome. These are some prototype tubes that were made really quick, and they do not have the reliefs in them for some of the material that I talked about. That's just because we might have raced it once, or we might have run it 20 miles and then we would change it. Or we would drill these out or throw them away or whatever it might be. These are something we pretty much got out of our prototype stash. But by making tubes from scratch, we can place all of the ports in exactly the right heights to give you a progressive system that doesn't blow through the mid-stroke and hammer your back into the bump stage. Also, we can make a system so in that it is so plush in the small stuff, it acts like we've just drilled holes in the piston, but we haven't. And then it gets progressively nicer and firmer in the mid where you need the support without body roll issues, and transition into the bump stage without it being drastic. That is all tube design. And tube design relative to the valving on the piston. It is very complicated. It is also very tedious and time consuming. We have done some of that work on computers, but it's always up to the seat of the pants for us to go test and see if we like the way it works. We'll find little things about it that we don't like, and we'll modify it again and make different tubes. All of these are made on CNCs in-house, and there's a big difference when you make it in-house instead of drilling holes. You don't have the deburring issues, you don't have things wearing out, you don't have to weld up holes and cause things warping and premature wear. All of the issues I just mentioned go away when you make your own tube. We are the only one in the industry that makes our own tube besides Fox. Yep, what you got, Steve?
Jay Ibarra said, how often should we revalve our shocks?
Oh, good question. I mean, in theory, once you get a setup in your car that you like, it should stay that way forever.
So he said someone else said, never mind, go ahead.
Okay. So in theory, once you get it right, it should stay that way forever. Other than maybe wearing the shock out and needing rebuilds. But we are constantly modifying what we do, because I feel that if we get a setup, for instance, that we just did in a Smart Shocks car and got it perfect to where a ton of people are happy, we don't stop modifying that. We just take it to different areas and run it a little harder, a little slower. We put different people in the car, get their opinions, and we continually modify our setup and make it better over time. So if you get valving and spring and tubes and everything done from us this year, next year we might have 2 or 3 upgrades to that are free to you if you're having the shocks rebuilt. So if you find you've had a leaker, or you've had them on the car for 3,000 miles, it's time for a freshen up. If you bring the shocks to us, we do the rebuilds. We will give you the internal mods that are an upgrade to your existing valving setup that might make it way better for free. There are some other things that we come out with a new product for your car, like let's say an adjuster is better and it's an option. Well, that's not free. You have to buy the adjuster if that's another upgrade that we came up with for your car. But when it comes to valving on the inside, we always do that for free.
So updates are free, upgrades are not.
Good one, actually, Steve. Updates to your system are free. Upgrades are not. And we do come up with upgrades from time to time, new parts, things like that. Other things that we do, besides making our own side stack screws so that we can tune side stacks. And I'm just going to bring over one of these side stacks so you can use a visual aid. But we will take and tune these side stacks, which we can do in different thicknesses for different results on the sides, as well as building our own tubes and having the port diameters the way we want them and locations the way we want them. That goes hand in hand with these screws. We will and can modify the adjuster mechanism, because inside this adjuster is valving. You can see there's a piston with valving on it. Here's a little bit of valving for that. It's hard to see and I can't pick it up, but there's adjuster valving that we modify. Every shock gets a Schrader valve on it, so you can charge nitrogen let down the road, as opposed to the stock one, which needs a custom tool for it. We will and can change the piston, so we might go from one style of flow rate piston to another, depending on the application. We will definitely be changing valving, and this is, again, not our valving, but I'm showing you a basic stack. We can do this style, we can do multiple or double stack, as in double pyramid stack. We can do flutter shims, we can do free bleed shims to gain different results. We do not typically ever drill a piston, certainly not with too big of a hole. We might have a bleed hole, or it might have come with a bleed hole just for assembly, but another option is you do free bleed shims. So this shim would sit on top of the piston, and it allows some free bleed between this shim and the next one that's stacked on top of it. And we can tune that. So instead of drilling a hole and dealing with what it is, we can change how that free bleed shim allows different amounts of oil through there. Again, we don't do that to make it plush. We do that so you can assemble it. The plush factor is in tube design and obviously in valve stack design too. So other things that we do, we make bump stops so we can modify the overall ground clearance of the car, because a lot of the X3s in particular sit the skid plate right on the ground and you will bottom it out no matter how stiff you run the system. So we'll lift the car up a little bit, give you another inch of ground clearance so that it doesn't bottom out as easy, especially if you're running short tires. If you're running tall tire, we don't have to do that. But there's oil viscosity is another option that we have. And a lot of other things I'm not even talking about. There's probably 10 more that we could use in our bag of tricks and tools to make the car work better. But one thing, two things, three things that we certainly are not doing. We are not welding up and warping your tube. We are not drilling ports out so big that you're gonna have too much flow. We are not drilling out pistons to where you lose all your bump stage. We are not overstacking valving on pistons so that you can blow up components and overpressurize shocks. We are not modifying tubes and making them worse. We're designing them from scratch. All of that is pretty standard issue for what we do. Now that I've said roughly what we do and shown you roughly what we see other people do, would you want to do any of these things right here if it was exactly the same amount of money? If you're going to spend $750 on that set or this one that just gave you valving, or that one right there where they just drilled out the tube and drilled out that piston and overvalved it and caused issues? Or would you consider spending the $750 with us, knowing that we do more for the money and we have more testing involved in it than anybody else, and we have the backing of Fox with dynos and making sure that we don't have overpressure issues that you get to pay for down the road if you did it with somebody else? Valving is not all the same. Certainly is not all the same. And when we hear people say, yeah, I got that, it makes us cringe because we know they might have something that was a 25% of maybe the modifications that we do, and they spent all the money on it. So don't do that. Make informed decisions. Steve.
Justin, I'm going to let Robbie Frazier answer that question for you. He said, there are so many reasons why shock therapy is the best in the industry and worth every penny.
Wow, Robbie, thank you very much. That is a tagline we should use in advertising.
I agree. And then we also have a lot of compliments on here, man. B. Wilson, had a small issue with my spring kit I ordered on Black Friday, and you guys took care of it. Thank you again.
Sorry for the issue. We are human, and hopefully we took care of it right away.
Thanks for my spring kit on my Textron, made an entire different car.
Awesome. Yeah, the Textron wakes up with spring kits, man. They're pretty soft and tend to bottom out pretty quick on bone stock.
And then we do have a question from Alex A. Denny. Says, hi, I ordered your spring kit for my KRX 1000. Can I buy a revalve kit for it without providing the car because I am in another country?
We do not sell our internal work and just by itself to you for you to install. I'm sorry, but we can't do that for many reasons. We actually tried a long time ago when it comes to other countries. We had people in Australia doing that, and then it would get installed wrong and we would look bad. So, and we can't really fly over that easy to inspect it. So we stopped doing all of that. One option that you have being in another country is you can sell your shocks to someone in your town, country. You can buy a set of shocks here in the States. We can do the work and modifications to those, and we will mail them to you. That often is cheaper than going through the process of mailing them to us and us mailing them back, having import taxes and tariffs in place, as well as a host of other issues with different countries that way. We do that a lot. I would say that once a week, we're probably buying a set of shocks, doing the work, and shipping it off to Dubai, Russia, South Africa, New Zealand, the Congo actually.
Yeah, the Congo.
It's funny you mentioned the Congo. They have a ton. They have a lot of red dirt.
I was like, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Red clay dirt, and they rip it, man. They got like rally races down there in UTVs. But we send all over the world that way, and it might be cheaper. Take a look at your shipping costs to your country, and what you could sell your shocks for, and give us a call. We'll let you know what a new set costs.
And then a couple people on here, and I know Mitchie and Chase are working on it. They say we need some more Pro XP videos.
Pro XP? Why specifically Pro XP? Like what we think about them, or more products on them?
I think, do we have products to install on them? Is there any installation videos? Do we already have that?
What else, Mitch?
I know you guys are working. I know you're working hard.
Limit straps on that.
Front limit straps we did on that car. We got spring kit on that car. What else?
Spring kit.
Has it been released?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Do you have anything in the works for the
I think
Pro
we might have
radius rods?
Radius rods are all coming up. We have a ton of radius rods instructional videos, as well as we have some more of the limit straps for like Cowies and Hondas coming up.
So specifically on the Pro, then we also have links coming up. And what else is on your list?
Top secrets coming.
Oh, you do have top secret new product coming out for that car too.
Oh, let's see if we can get Mitch to say it.
No, Mitch, don't say it. It is coming. Really, really cool stuff. You guys will like it. That's for sure.
2021.
In 2021, yes, it will happen in 2021. We will promote the you know what out of it, and hopefully you guys will like it.
2021 is going to be a great year, Justin.
It is kind of like fine wine. We got a pile of stuff coming out. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be good.
We spent 2020 indoors designing new parts, and it's all coming out next year. If you guys got any questions on any of this stuff, please shoot them right away. Otherwise, I'm going to walk over this way and show you something that is important to know, especially when you are choosing somebody. Again, valving and internal shock work is not created equal, and just because you spend the same amount of money with a shock guy does not mean you're going to get the same amount of work or the same amount of internal effort put into it. So one thing that you want to make sure.
Speaking of XP Pros.
There's a pro for you. Pro video. One thing that you want to make sure of is that your shock guy doesn't go drive down the street to the parts house and go buy the valving that he thinks he needs to put on in your car just for your car. You want to make sure you're using somebody that's got an abundance of valving so that no matter what your tune requires, no matter what your car needs for ride quality, it is on the shelf for them to grab and use instantly to modify your car to the best of their ability and to the best of the car's potential ride quality. So valving is super important. Make sure whoever you got has got too much of it. Otherwise, you could be selling yourself short. Any more questions, guys?
Just some random ones. Nothing to do with necessarily today.
Well,
what's the bottoming ground clearance fix on a Turbo S Dynamics?
Well, if you're not talking specifically about stiffening the car up, either with spring or valving, internal mods, bypass tube modifications to make it not bottom out as easy. If you're talking about just the ground clearance, the easiest way to get ground clearance, taller tire. The other one is you can put a little bit more bump stop on the car and have it stop a little earlier and gain some ground clearance that way. We have messed with that, changing and tuning it quite a bit. You can get a Turbo S to ride amazing and not bottom out without having to choke up some of the travel with a bump stop like that though. So hopefully that helps.
Oh, here's a good one.
I can say, no, let me, okay.
Here's a good one.
E54 said, in your opinion, who else in the industry is legit?
Well, I think that I am going to stay away from that question because we don't talk any smack and we're not going to promote anybody either. But there's some guys that do just race car work, only race car work, that are really awesome. But as far as people that are tuning on a daily basis for play cars and things like that, then I'm gonna stay away from that.
Great answer.
What?
Good answer.
I did that politically good.
I loved that. Yes.
Oh, all right. I was dying.
I didn't.
I was dying to go the other way. I'm not gonna lie.
I know.
But I'm not gonna do it, you guys. Just you can tease all you want. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna show you what we see, but I'm not gonna tell you where it came from. Forget it. Not gonna happen. I wouldn't want someone doing that to me if I was done.
Agreed.
You guys got anything, or we can get out of here? If you're done.
I think we're good. I think we can get out of here.
Okay, so.
E-Double wanted to give you no worries, respectable on that.
Respect. Cool, thank you. So I'm going to promote Thursday. Now that I know it's not today, then Thursday is in 2 days, right?
Yeah. According to you, Thursday's a week from today.
Apparently it is. So Thursday, 2 days from now, we are going to do a Christmas cheer video. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to just about everybody in the shop, which by the way is about 35 people.
Jesus.
I know, crazy. But we're going to introduce you to all of them, and they're going to have all of their Christmas outfits on and show you everything that they've got in their Christmas cheer bag of tricks, because everybody's wearing everything from the Christmas party on Thursday. So, and Steve just found that out.
I'm just hearing about that right now, so cool.
So, yeah, the Christmas party was pretty good. You guys might want to tune in on Thursday and see what everybody's got for costumes. Maybe no costumes, and there might be some Grinches.
Dumb.
Anyway, so tune in on Thursday. If you guys have any questions about what we've talked about, then give us a call. We'll try and help you through all that. If you have any questions about parts, then call the guys up front to 623-217-4959. I was trying to make.
Why don't you give out your cell phone, Justin?
I almost gave out my cell. It's actually happened.
It's Thursday. Give it out your cell phone number.
Wouldn't be the first time. Or if you guys want to buy some parts, then go to the website, shocktherapist.com. We will send them out to you as quick as we can. Have a great week. See you Thursday.